Author and journalist John Gunther wrote biographies of Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, as well as Presidents Eisenhower and Franklin D. Roosevelt. He also wrote the biography of a man you may not have heard of, Albert Lasker. But the fact that he's part of the Gunther bibliography with these world-renowned figures tells you he has quite a story to tell. Albert Lasker is known as the father of modern advertising.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
Catchy jingles and slogans help tell stories to sell products.
It's persuasion disguised as entertainment.
But advertising isn't always that colorful or memorable.
Alka-Seltzer, plop, plop, fizz, fizz.
Advertising as we know it is the product of one man's imagination.
He was a visionary.
As a teenager, Albert Lasker starts at Chicago's Lord & Thomas ad agency for $10 a week. By the time he's 32, he owns the firm and builds a fortune.
He was one of the most prolific minds, probably of the 20th century.
Albert pays himself $1 million a year at a time when there's no income tax. At his peak, he's worth $45 million, worth several hundred million in today's money. But Albert Lasker says what motivates him is seeing what his brain can do.
He recognized that there was this perfect intersection between factual content and emotional content that would get someone to select you.
And he uses his talents not only in the world of advertising, but also politics, sports, and philanthropy.
You couldn't help but be fascinated because the stories were just legendary.
Advertising is a mosaic of disciplines: art, psychology, statistics, economics. But in the late 19th century, ad men simply sell you space in the newspaper with maybe a description of the product.
It was really simple, like, this soap makes you smell good, right? Or, you know.
J.P. Palmer is strategy director at the firm once owned by Albert Lasker. It's now called Foot, Cone, and Belding. We meet in an area of the office known as Lasker Hall.
And I think what Albert Lasker kind of did is revolutionized it and started to think more about why people should care. And that ability to move from like description to persuasion, I think, is kind of what his legacy represents and is something that I really hold dear in my practice.
Albert Lasker tells companies he can write better copy for a stronger sales pitch.
And he starts convincing clients we can take on more and more of your advertising. Well, and this is what Albert and his team were masters at, trying to find a way to differentiate your product. Why?
Mitch Engel was managing director of Foot, Cone, and Belding and an admirer of Albert Lasker. At the turn of the century, the power of ideas is just what's needed to capture the emerging forces of mass production, mass media and entertainment, national magazines and mail-order catalogs.
He was really at the forefront of transforming how agencies were viewed as full partners as opposed to just executors for their clients.
Lasker is among the first to incorporate scientific research, but he has a creative mind and a lot of energy.
So here he has an agency that's out there selling scientific advertising methodologies, but he is at times in meetings going, I don't give a crap about all that stuff. My mind tells me this is the right idea. And seriously, more often than not, he was probably right.
Along with the high energy and creativity, there is a downside. Sometimes he's erratic. Today, he may be described as bipolar.
I can see that actually being maybe a superpower of his, to be able to see things that other people didn't or engage in ways that might seem a little uncomfortable.
Mark Wilson is an ad guy and a psychologist.
To come at it from different angles and have maybe be a little bit unorthodox in how you solve a problem or how you get to creativity seems to be kind of a valid approach.
But the wild creativity can be a problem too, especially when combined with alcohol. In 1907, he suffers a mental breakdown. With few good options for treatment, he recovers in a retreat in Germany. Back at work, his creativity helps solve a problem. Every so often, orange growers would have a surplus and have to throw away thousands of oranges. Lasker encourages them to band together for a somewhat new product.
So we got 2,000 orange growers to agree. They suggested the name Sunkist. They became the Sunkist growers. They started advertising oranges for orange juice. They quintupled the volume of oranges consumed in the United States almost overnight.
Notice the lady now smokes, and the captain wears his World War I award.
Not every creative idea has stood the test of time and good taste.
They did a whole series of ads to convince women, when you have a need to put something in your mouth, don't go for candy or some sort of sweet, smoke a cigarette, because it's not going to affect your waistline.
He capitalizes on the emerging women's market in the 1920s. Many public places prohibit smoking by women. Lucky Strike says protect your lungs and figures by suppressing cravings for sweets. The government steps in, but the damage is done. Other products include Palmolive soap, Pepsodent toothpaste, and Kotex.
Do you ever get a product or a client that I just don't know what to do with this?
Yeah.
Jennifer Newman is now the head of what was Lasker's firm, Lord & Thomas, now called Foote, Cone & Belding.
What does it say about us that we are so easily manipulated?
That's a good question. You have to make sure that you understand something intimate about them, and we call that an insight, but I think it's an intimate detail about them that allows them to be open-minded to consider something different. It is harder to break through, it's harder to capture their attention, and they're getting so much information from disparate sources that where does the truth lie is very hard for people to understand. You have to be attention-grabbing and interesting more than right.
Behind at the Cub hitter. Here's a long fly out in the right field. It's a home run.
Lasker's success in advertising leads him to other ventures. Lasker joins William Wrigley Jr. as an investor in the Chicago Cubs. He convinces him to rename Weigman Park to Wrigley Field. It's good publicity for the chewing gum business. In 1919, the Black Sox scandal is a threat to baseball and their investment. Lasker suggests a baseball commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
And that all came out of Albert Lasker's thinking of, we've got to clean up the way the public thinks about baseball.
Yes, Albert Lasker sees things differently. That's why the Republican Party seeks his help for Warren Harding in the 1920 presidential race. Lasker recruits movie stars to visit Harding on his front porch, and it's all featured in newsreels. Lasker focuses on women who are now voting for the first time. This presidential race features modern advertising techniques.
I don't know if we should be proud of that or condemn that, because we know what's happened since.
Let's go back to 1920 for the amateur golf matches that saw Chick Evans pitted against Francis Ouimet for the title.
Tired of the drama of baseball and politics, Lasker turns to golf. Wealthy businessmen invite him to their country clubs, but they won't let him join because he's Jewish. So he builds his own course in Lake Forest, Illinois. Mill Road Farm Golf Club, one of the most challenging in America.
Bobby Jones came, Chick Evans locally came to play it, all the big names came, and he had a $500 bounty out there for anybody who broke par. Well, in the history of the golf course, only one person is known to have broke par and earned that $500, and that was Tommy Armour.
The golf course is gone, replaced by homes. But Lasker's estate still stands among the more modest suburban homes, a relic of his success. He donates millions to charity and expands research at the National Institutes of Health.
Here's a man that spent the first X number of years earning $45 million so he could spend the rest of his life finding meaningful ways to give it away. And that's a nice tribute.
In Lasker's day, Lord & Thomas employs 60 people. Today, 700 people work in Chicago at Foote, Cone & Belding. From printing presses to artificial intelligence, technology changes, but a sales pitch still needs people.
I have to be able to look at something and decide if it's right or wrong, or if it's good or bad. You will always need the human for that.
And perhaps today people are a little more savvy and skeptical when it comes to sales pitches.
We now live in a time where consumers sniff through the BS incredibly easily.
But if it's authentic and it comes through as real and true, then all of a sudden I'm going to connect to this in a way that supersedes my logical thinking.
It's that intersection that Albert Lasker pioneered more than a century ago. Persuasion disguised as entertainment. He amasses a fortune only to give it away. A dynamic man who is somewhat lost to history.
Advertising exists in the shadows. And when you're the puppet master, it kind of serves you best to not be also a celebrity in your own right. And so that's probably why you haven't heard of him.